You should be getting.
Brent, thanks a ton. Yeah, no, it's fantastic to be here, and thank you so much for not giving me a hard time about being a Bostonian and a Patriots fan, which is normally your MO is to give me a hard time about that. So,
Yeah, I thought about it, but
um,
we don't have enough time, so we'll just go ahead.
right, perfect, awesome, excellent. Well, I'm psyched to be here, and I'm psyched to share some tips. As Brent said, I've been doing marketing for a long time, and including sort of the last 8.5 years or so at Hubspot, where we're able to build something really special. And today I'm a pretty active angel investor. I've made about 20 investments in different startups. Four of them have actually exited, which has been great. And I also advise a number of other companies, usually startups and smaller companies, on their growth strategy. So I really love working with small companies of all different types. And I actually think it's a very exciting time to be a small business today because there's so many more tools available to you. So when I talk to small businesses, I always, ask them sort of what's your biggest challenge, and not every single one, but the most frequent answer that I get is that generating more revenue, getting more new business is usually the key challenge for most of them. Um, and then you sort of dig in and say, well, what's okay? Well, that makes sense. Everybody wants to grow, everybody wants more revenue, but what's your second biggest challenge? And the second biggest challenge for a lot of them that I hear is just, whoa, like there's just so many options and tools and new technologies available to do marketing and to help you grow as a small business that it's extremely overwhelming. This is the marketing technology landscape graphic from a site called Chief Martech, a guy named Scott Brinker, who, for those of you who haven't seen this before, it has over 3,500 logos of different marketing-related technologies that you can use for your business. Now, not all of these are appropriate for small businesses, but my estimate is probably about at least about half of them are actually appropriate for small businesses. There's a lot of interesting solutions out there for small businesses now, and it makes it a very overwhelming and very confusing landscape to sort of wade yourself through. So what I'm going to do, with probably a little help from Brent along the way, and definitely more help from you guys with your questions, is to try to navigate through that a little bit and just lay out some of the real basics, the things that you should think about if you are a small business to get going with some marketing. So we're going to talk about search, we're going to talk about content, social media, we're going to talk about mobile, and a little bit about digital advertising. But again, pipe in with your questions. I think it's best if we can hear directly from you guys and talk about some of these topics and the specific parts that you guys want to address. So let's dive into search first. Um, we all know the importance of Google and to some degree the other search engines, but for most of the time, Google has a very, very dominant presence in most markets for most searches. And the key question for every small business is, how do you rank higher? How do you get found? How, when somebody is searching for something relevant to your business, do you make sure that you're the one that's showing up so you can hopefully get that customer to come to you? And there's two fundamental things that really drive how high you rank in Google. The first one is context, and I'll talk more about that, but essentially context is the information that's on your website or on the web page that is on that topic. So it's the actual words and the text on that page. The second part is authority, and this is something where it's actually not necessarily on that page or on your website. It's the other things around the web that give Google an indication of how important or not important you are, how important or not important your site is, that particular page, your business overall. And Google looks at essentially those two things, and there's lots of other some smaller factors. It's a pretty complicated algorithm, but at the highest level, this is essentially what Google looks at to decide who is going to rank how high. So let's break those two things down and give you some tips about how to maximize your context and maximize your authority. The first thing is you should think about what keywords are important for you to rank for. And I'm going to tell a little story that illustrates one important part of keyword strategy. And that's that if you were in a car accident or something like that and damaged your teeth, and I were to ask you what type of person would you go to get your teeth fixed, after you've been in a car accident or something like that, you would probably say something like a cosmetic dentist, right? And probably a lot of people are searching for that. However, I have a friend of a friend who actually is what I would call a cosmetic dentist, and he likes to refer to himself by the professional term, which is prosthodontist, right? Here's the problem with prosthodontist. No one really knows what it is or how to spell it. right? Except for other prosthodontists or maybe people that are in sort of the dental field as professionals. And so if you use the main keyword on your website as prosthodontist, there's not that many people searching for that compared to cosmetic dentist. And your customers are the ones that are going to be searching most frequently on the term cosmetic dentist. They're going to search for, cosmetic dentist Atlanta, cosmetic dentist Buckhead, whatever it is. You're going to be trying to find one probably near you. You might want to read some reviews, et cetera, et cetera. That's what you're going to be searching for as a potential customer. And so you need to make sure that when you're thinking about your keywords, you're always thinking about it from your customer's point of view, not from your point of view. And that's really the point behind the story. The second part of keywords is you want to think about keywords where they're relevant to you. So not something like, for instance, this particular business wouldn't want to try to just do dentistry or more general terms like that because they're not really applicable to you as a business, and it's going to be a lot harder to rank for broader terms like that. And then you also want to make sure you're thinking about, so relevance is important, the overall keyword volume, but most important is think about what are the keywords that your customers, your best customers are going to be searching for, and use those as the keywords that you target. Once you have a keyword strategy in place, and you can actually use different keywords on each page of your website, like one page can sort of target one keyword short phrase. And so if you have 10 website pages, there's actually 10 keyword phrases you can try to rank for. Once you have a few of those keyword phrases, you've done a little bit of research and thought about them and you know what you want to rank for, then the next step is to continue to maximize that context and get the keywords set up on your website, on your web pages. The major things you want to do are, the most important thing is actually this thing called the page title. And it doesn't actually show up in the text of the web page where most people look, but it shows up in most browsers in the text that, like in the tab of the window. And if you sort of push your mouse over that tab, you can sort of see all of it. And in this case, I have a law firm up near me in Boston, and his page title is Newton, MA, Newton, Massachusetts, divorce, custody, family lawyer. And then he has his actual law firm name. Now, what I like about this from an SEO perspective, from a search engine optimization perspective, is that he's focused, the keywords at the front of the page title are the town that he's in. So he's going to attract a lot of local customers, which, law firms tend to be to some degree a local business. And then he's got keywords to describe, he's got lawyer in there, but he's got some keywords to describe the type of law he does, because obviously he does family law, some divorce stuff, some custody stuff. And then he also has his law firm name, but he has that at the end. So the most important keywords are at the front, and he's got those that are sort of more generic things to describe his business. The second thing is the headings and the content. So the actual, the larger type text on the page, the headings on the page, the words in those headings, Google sees as a little bit more important than the other words on the page. And in this case, he's got, Greater Boston / Massachusetts divorce and family law attorney. So not the exact same keywords as he has in the page title, but very similar and good keywords that he should want to rank for. It's no surprise that when I search for, I think I searched for Newton Family Law Firm or something like that, he was one of the first few results that popped up. The other thing that isn't on the page that you can see as a human when you look at it, but is actually in the page when you edit the web page, is this thing called the description. And that's the stuff, that's the text that shows up underneath the URL. And so if you look, there's the page title, there's the URL that's here in green, and then underneath that in Google and most search engines there's some text there. And that text in this case is, based in Newton, we proudly represent individual spouses and families throughout, blah, blah, blah. They're a Greater Boston, Massachusetts divorce and family law attorney. That text is actually important because it's what people see that describes your website. So these are the major things that are on your website or on each of your web pages that are that context portion. There's also all the other text in the page, which to some degree is important. There's some other things. There's what's called alt text on images and things like that. But if you get these three things roughly right, you'll be doing probably a better job than many businesses currently are in terms of search engine optimization. However, there's one other thing I want to talk about. There's a big mistake that a lot of people make, and that's to have websites that are completely optimized for how they look to a human. And so this is an example from a number of years ago. I actually think they've changed their site since then, but this is Stowe Mountain Lodge. It's a beautiful resort up in Vermont. And you look here and you're like, wow, you have mountains, I could understand that, probably in the winter you probably ski there. You got a beautiful golf course, you got a lake, so you probably golf, in the summer. This looks like a great place to stay, really beautiful. What's interesting here, though, is that if you were to look at this website, a lot of the things I just said are actually contained in images that Google can't necessarily process. So if you actually look at the text, if you were to strip this out and do like look at it as like a text browser, it says Stone Mountain Lodge, Stone Vermont Resorts. Like nowhere in this text does it say either golf or skiing, which are the two major things you can do at this resort. And I would think you would want Google to know that this is a golf resort with an awesome, 18-hole golf course, and it's also a skiing resort in the winter with some great mountains nearby that you can easily get to with some, great snow and conditions and blah, blah, blah. But those things are actually not contained within the text of the web page. So this page is not doing a good job of explaining to Google the things that you can do with the resort or what type of resort it is. And you can check this out and see what your site looks like. If you have a lot of images and a lot of flash or something like that, like a lot of animations on your site, it might be the case that there isn't enough text there to actually tell Google what you do. And there's a few of them out there, and there's actually even a plugin to Chrome that you can install too if you're a Chrome browser user. But there's a site called texteyes.net that you can go to and then type in the URL of your company, and then you can see what the page looks like just with text, and it'll look similar to what I have here. And that's sometimes a really valuable exercise to do. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the context portion of things that you need to worry about. The bad news is that the context is only about 20% of the reason why you rank high in Google. The big driving factor behind it, usually you got to get the context right, but the big driving factor is usually the authority. And the authority really boils down to two things. It's a combination of links and social proof, both of which are indications to Google that you are an important website. So if you have a lot of other websites linking to you, and linking to the particular page that we're talking about, that's good, and that's an indication to Google that that page is important and more important than other pages of the internet that might not have as many links. And same idea with social proof. So the number of people that have shared that page on Facebook or on Twitter or other social services, things like that, if Google looks at those social signals as another indication that it's difficult to fake that that people enjoy that page and it's a good page, and therefore they should rank it higher in search results because a lot of people have shared it in social media. So the key question on those two things is like, how do I do better with social, which I'll move to in a minute. But first, let's talk about how do you basically get more links. And there's a couple of things here. One is if you are a local business, and lots of local businesses out there, lots of small businesses out there are local businesses, you want to make sure you're doing a pretty good job of at least getting listed in the major, I would 10 to 15 local directories. There's a lot of different local business sites, from the really big ones like Yelp or whatever Yellow Pages site covers your sort of area, down to, you definitely want to get Google Places going and things like that, but there's a ton of others. And there's a couple sites that I listed here on the slide, and Brent will make these slides available afterward. I already emailed them to him, so he'll make them available to everybody. But a couple sites there where you can go and actually get some more information, and a couple of those sites will actually do like a sort of a little bit of a free check on to see which sites you're listed on and sort of what the listing looks like on some of those different sites. So there's Moz Local, which is a new product from Moz, which is pretty good. Yext and Single Platform all sort of help you with that. So the first thing you want to do if you're a local business is make sure your local listings are sort of good. The second thing is, okay, well, if I want to get more links, one of the best ways to get more links is to have great content. And so this is a study from Hubspot. It's actually a few years old now, but I guarantee the results are sort of very similar if you were to rerun the data today. But if you have a blog, and that basically means you're producing content on a regular basis, new, fresh content, you're going to encourage more people to link to you because you have more content that's worth linking to. And so companies that blog get 97% more links coming into them, which helps you rank higher in search. And so if you want to say, okay, well, I need to publish more content, what does that mean? Does it have to be a blog? No, a blog is a great option for a lot of people. I think it's a good format. I think it's an easier way to get started. But there's lots of other things you can do. You can do a podcast. Brent has produced, I don't know, probably hundreds of podcasts over the course of his career. He's a huge podcaster, and podcasting has become very big in the past few years. Videos are another one, photos, presentations, ebooks, PDFs, things like that. Especially if you're a B2B company, maybe a small business, but you sell to other businesses, presentations that show off your expertise can be great. And there's a site called SlideShare, slideshare.net. That's a great place to post those. It's sort of like YouTube for PowerPoint. And all those sort of different formats of content can encourage people to link to you, and it's also good stuff to share within socials. So the next question people usually say is, okay, fine, I hear you, Mike. I want to create some more content, but what should I talk about? They sort of sit there and they stare at the computer screen and they want to write a blog article, but they have no idea what to write in the article, right? Here's the thing, especially as a small business, you get questions all the time from current customers, potential customers, happy customers, unhappy customers. I will guarantee you that every single question you get from a customer, at least 100 times more people are typing that question into Google every month. And so if you merely just take those questions your customers are asking you and write articles, whatever you'd say to the answer if someone asked you one of those questions, just type that out as a blog article, and the title of the article is the question that the person asked you. That is great content, because people are probably not going to pick up the phone first anymore. They're going to type it into Google first, and now your answer is right there, and they're going to find you and find your answer. And so that's a great way to sort of think about creating some content. So that idea of sort of finding questions that need to be answered, if you have like somebody who does any customer service for you, ask them what questions they're getting. Frequently ask questions from customers. If you have somebody who does sales for you, ask them. You probably also get a lot of these questions by email, not necessarily just phone or just in person. And a lot of times if you just scan through the sent items in your email, you'll find sometimes when you've answered those questions, you can cut and paste that, and that's maybe not formatted exactly like a blog article, but it's a very good start a lot of times. If you have any followers on your Facebook page or Twitter for your business or things like that, it's a great place to just ask them, like, hey, we're thinking about what we're going to blog about next month. What questions do you guys have that you want answered about, if you're a pool installer, it can, be questions about pools. It could be about something else, whatever your business is about, just ask them. And then the other thing you can do is there's a bunch of sites on the internet that they're basically question and answer sites. If you were to go to like Yahoo Answers or Quora and search for keywords related to your industry, you can see what questions people are asking on those sites, and that can be a great place to then take those questions and turn them into blog articles that you have posted on your site. So there's a lot of ways to get good content or good ideas for blog articles you can post. Now the second part of that authority from Google, and this is sort of the bridge from the content section of the presentation to the social section, is that social proof. And so the more active and engaging you are on social media, you're going to attract a lot of attention merely within social media. So if you're active on Twitter, you're going to attract a lot of people within the Twitter universe. Same thing for Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn if you're a B2B company. So you're going to attract a lot of attention within those mediums. But the other thing you do is the more active you are on social, the more likely people are to share your content. And that's another good signal to Google that you should actually rank higher for SEO. So all these things really start to work together. You're probably figuring out now where if you have, to have good SEO, you need good content. You have good content, you need to promote it so it gets more people linking to you, and you need to promote it in social media such that it gets more social sharing so the content will rank higher. So all these things kind of feed off of each other. But let's dive in a little bit to the social media side of things. Basically, the biggest tip here is just be active and engaging. Try a few different things, figure out what works for you, given your personality, the sort of personality of the brand of your business and the community that you've been able to build, and then go with it. And so there's a couple different, sort of styles here. I sort of picked two different restaurants, and one restaurant likes to post their menu and post different photos of their menu on Instagram. And this other one does a lot more on Twitter. And they've got, they're retweeting other things. They're answering some, fans. Somebody else said, uh, talking to somebody about burgers, and one of their favorites is this restaurant, and they retweeted them. Other things like that. So there's a couple different ways you can sort of think about promoting it. But I think the most important thing is to make sure that you have some personality on social media. Don't be too dry. I think especially as a small business, you really have an opportunity to let that personality show through. Show people that there's people that run your business, and you're a very people-centric business. Is one of the advantages of a small business, is that you can be a lot more personal than the large corporations. And so I'd make sure you do that. Now, there's even some examples of large companies that actually have a lot of personality and do this pretty well. I'll give you one small example that Brent will love, which is that I tweeted once. Yeah, you're gonna like this, Brent. So I tweeted once that I was actually taking a flight, and I was on JetBlue, and I knew I'd scheduled during the Super Bowl. But the great thing about JetBlue is they have TVs, and so I was like, oh well, this is great. I'll just, I knew the Patriots weren't going to be in it that year, and so I going to get on this flight, and I'm like, oh, it's weird. I'd never watched Super Bowl on an airplane before, and I was like, oh, anybody have any ideas about how to make this fun? And I never expected that JetBlue, this giant company, right, would actually answer everything to say about this. So I got a few answers from some of my followers. I got a little note from Brent about how sad I must be that the Patriots weren't in the Super Bowl. But JetBlue had a really cute comment that said, they're not picking sides, but I could mix the Terra Blue potato chips that they serve with Doritos for sort of blue and orange, right? And you have blue for Seattle, you get orange for the Broncos because this is a couple years ago, and that might be a fun little thing. And I was like, that's kind of cool. It took them a minute, right, to write that, but it was kind of very interesting and sort of fun, and indicates that they can kind of have a little fun and have a little bit of personality to them. But I did want to, so anyway, so that's one example of sort of having personality. I did want to just have everyone recall that Seattle did win that year, and they actually went on to the Super Bowl the next year. However, that was the year that they did lose to the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
So,
I knew it
yeah,
was
there you go,
coming at
Brent.
some
You knew I
point.
had to work that in somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, you're welcome. So in any event, once you have the social media thing going, another thing that is just huge now, especially for small businesses and especially for local businesses, is mobile, right? I can't tell you the amount of time that I spend on my phone as compared to my computer. For me, it's probably about 10 to 1. I just ordered something off Amazon off my phone, I don't know, an hour and a half ago. My wife and I were chatting, and we're about to do something with the kids this weekend, and we needed a piece of gear for the kids. And she's like, yeah, can you check that out and figure it out? And I was like, yep. And I was sitting on the couch. Kids were wrestling me, and a couple clicks, tap, tap, tap on my Amazon app, and all of a sudden it's going to show up in 2 days because we're Prime members, right? And never open the computer for any of that stuff. So more and more, I think the phone is becoming phones or tablets or other sort of different size devices are becoming more and more the way that people interact. And even forget about, social media apps and little news apps. I mean, searching for restaurants, making reservations, ordering things, finding people, there's just so much more functionality that's built into the phone with the fact that it has a phone, so you can click and call people, and the fact that it has a camera built in. I use it as my scanner, so if I have documents I have to sign and send to people, legal agreements or things like that, I print them out, I sign them, I take photos of my phone, I got an app that turns it into a PDF and emails it off. So I think of the phone as in many ways, so those other devices becoming like the central thing that people use. And so what you really need to make sure is, as a small business, is that your content, your website, anything else you're doing is very accessible in all those different formats. That's just critically important today. I'll give you one example. I found another local law firm. So there's the one that we talked about earlier on the right there, and actually I brought up their website on my phone, and I was like, oh, that's pretty nicely formatted. It's basically the same content. It's shrunk down. They did a good job. It presents pretty well on the phone. I did a little clicking around, and after checking 4 or 5 others, found another similar law firm. It's actually in a slightly different town, but same area. And I brought it up my phone, and it's clearly made for a big screen. So the font is really small. It's the way the width of the page really wants me to kind of scroll left and right as I read it, which is really kind of a total pain, difficult to interact with, and just not really optimized for the phone, right? And here you have the one on the right. I mean, imagine if you were doing some searching on your phone, because you're on your couch, maybe watching TV, you got a little second screen action going on, and you find the one on the left, like that's kind of hard to deal with. You find the one on the right, and you're sort of like, oh, cool, I can click and I can call, or there's a button here, right, just contact them. Weekend and evening appointments available. Like it's just much more accessible. I think between the two, you're more likely to sort of contact the one on the right, and you're more likely to end up becoming a customer or a client. So that stuff is important. And if you're sending out email, so a lot of times people these days are thinking a lot about mobile websites. Also make sure your email is well formatted for mobile devices. Yeah, especially if you've been doing email for a while and using like an older template. A lot of the older email templates are actually not formatted well for mobile devices. I have a couple examples here. If you look at the one on the left, the email on the left on a mobile device, that the text is really wide, and so you have to do that scroll left and right thing, which is kind of a pain. The one in the middle, they fit all the text in one screen, but it's really, really, really tiny. And if you were to stretch it and make it bigger, it wouldn't paginate, so it would be too wide for the screen. And then the one on the right, a lot of people, including myself, have images turned off in email to make it load faster, depending on which client they use. I also do it for privacy reasons, so people can't track which emails I'm opening and not. But if you have email that's primarily images in your template, then some portion of people might not be able to see those as well as you might expect. So make sure, just check the way the email looks on your phone and a few other people's phones, things like that. There's actually if you wanted to check the way your email looks in a lot of different email clients and a lot of different mobile devices, there's a company called Litmus, Litmus. And I believe that I think they have a free one. I know for money you can do it, but I believe they actually might even have a free check where you can see what your email looks like on some different devices. And so I would definitely do that and make sure your email template is mobile formatted as well. I mean, I check 97% of my email on my phone. I do very little of my email on my computer. I do some. Basically, I try to do it all on my phone, and the stuff that I require the computer for that kind of falls through the cracks, then I am getting to it a little bit later the next time I'm at my computer. And so the mobile stuff is critically important. I didn't want to go too much into apps because I think for most small businesses, apps are, frankly, probably a little bit too much. And it's just in terms of something that you need to maintain and things like that. I will say for restaurants, local restaurants, you might want to think about having a mobile app for local ordering and things like that. And there is actually a company called, I'm sure there's others, but there's one called Chow Now that I'm familiar with that will actually do like a white labeled app. So you can basically use them and they'll create an app, under your restaurant's name and whatever, that's just for you. If you want to do sort of local ordering and delivery and things like that through an app. And there's a couple others. I have some links at the end of the presentation that sort of direct you to those things. All right. The final sort of topic that we're going to talk about a little bit is we're going to talk about advertising. Now, the thing I want people to remember about advertising is that most people ignore it, especially on the internet. And so when you think about any web page that has, an article and some content on it, the ads, typically banner ads, get a 0.1% or less click-through rate. Ads have a very, very, very low click-through rate. Less than 1 in 1,000 people click on them. In many cases, it's even more like 1 in 10,000. And so there's a very, very sort of low rate of people that interact with those advertisements. So in my opinion, what you really want to be, if at all possible, is to be the content, not the ads around the content. You're going to be a lot more effective taking the money that you would have spent on advertising and spend it on content. Now, all that being said, there are some times you want to do advertising, and if you're getting a good return off of advertising, the great thing about advertising is as soon as you start to spend a little bit of money, you should get some results from it. So it happens very fast, and it's relatively easy. It's probably much easier than writing blog articles and doing all that content marketing. So let's talk a little bit about advertising. And I will say I didn't even bother to put in any information about Google AdWords. I feel like that's been around for so long that most people have some level of familiarity with it. And so basically the way Google AdWords works is if you have, for people that are doing a Google search, if you want to show up at the top or on the right, depending on which format they're running, you can bid a certain amount per click based on different keywords. And so if there's keywords relevant to your business that people are searching on, you can do that. You can also do geographic limitations. So if you only want to show up for, family law firm in the greater Atlanta area, you can do things like that. And so there's a lot of options there with Google, but I do feel like most people have at least some level of familiarity with that. So I wanted to go through sort of some of the newer things that people might have less familiarity with. So Twitter. So you can do advertising on Twitter. I think especially for B2B companies, it can be really effective. For some consumer companies, if you're careful about how you do your targeting, I think it can be effective as well. The key thing with all these platforms is there are a lot of targeting options available now. I remember when Twitter first came out and they had no ads, and then they first launched a little bit of advertising, and they really didn't have very many targeting options. There are a lot of targeting options available now. There's a couple that I think are interesting. The one is obviously for any location-based business, the geographic targeting is really, really important and something you want to run on probably all your advertising. A couple other things to think about is certainly keyword targeting could be good. Follower targeting, like if you maybe are a new business and there's another company that's in your same area or same industry that's similar to you, you can actually target your ads to the people that follow that business. So somebody doing a really good job on Twitter has a lot of followers, but their followers are relevant customers for you. That could be an interesting thing to try. And then the one other thing I want to talk, well, I'll actually talk about this when we get to Facebook. But there's other ways if you want to look at sort of based on, they have some predictive stuff that they do around sort of certain shopping or spending patterns. You can try that stuff or different interests and things like that. And so there's a lot of different targeting options. Facebook is the one where it has even a much larger audience than Twitter. And for most consumer companies and even some B2B companies, Facebook can be a really powerful tool. Now, they have some similar ones, so like location, if you're a location-based business, you definitely want to use that in your targeting. Demographics, Facebook actually has a lot more detailed demographics because people give Facebook a lot more information when they sign up than Twitter, and so the demographics that Facebook have are a lot deeper. Obviously interests, behaviors, again, you're seeing a lot of the same types of things here that we just saw when we talked about Twitter. Also some connections, which would be similar to the following stuff that Twitter had. And there's two other things here, custom audiences and lookalike audiences. Twitter actually has these available too. They don't describe them as well on that page before, but this stuff is available as well. The first one is custom audiences. This one's really interesting. So let's say you have an email list that you've developed over the years of your business. Maybe you have 1,000 people that are on your email list. You can actually take those email addresses, upload them to Facebook, and then Facebook tries to match those email addresses to users of Facebook, and then you can tell Facebook only advertise to people that have those email addresses. So essentially, if you have some set group of people that you know because they've been customers of you before or signed up for your email list or whatever it is, and you're identifying them by email address, you can actually tell Facebook only to advertise to those particular people. So you're basically creating your own custom audience of people you want to get to and advertise to. That can be really powerful. The second thing they can do is if you have a custom audience, they can then say, okay, we know because we're Facebook and we're super smart, we have all this data analytics going on. If you upload that list of 1,000 people, we can find thousands, many thousands more that are very similar to those people, using a combination of demographics and interests and behaviors and location and all those things on the left. And that can be one where it can be really effective as well. So maybe you're a smaller business, you got maybe some small number of customers, but you want to find more customers that look like the customers you have today. If you have those customers' email addresses, you can upload them, and Facebook will try to match the Facebook profiles and then try to advertise to more people that look similar to that. And if you were to combine that with like location and some other stuff, you get to be pretty targeted, but still use a lot of the intelligence. So, excuse me. So there's a lot of options there with Facebook targeting as well as Twitter. Those two are probably out of the social media platforms, the two with the most fully developed advertising platforms that have sort of the most options, give you the most access, are friendly to work with small businesses, meaning that you can just, type in your credit card number and kind of get going. A lot of the other newer ones, things like Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, are really more geared to large companies, big enterprises that are going to do a huge advertising buy, and they'll have like an account manager. It's a little bit more of a manual process. They won't necessarily deal with a smaller business. Um, but Twitter and Facebook and Google are really the big ones where small and mid-sized businesses have a little bit of play there in terms of advertising. One other one I wanted to point out, and this is a startup that I met with a few months ago that I thought was really cool. It's a company called Sidewalk, spelledCidewalk. And this is really targeted at especially small businesses, but especially location-based businesses. But even if you weren't location-based and maybe you want to do some advertising in a couple locations, it could be interesting. They use data from a variety of different sources to target people by where they physically are, and it's only mobile advertising. So if you are, I don't know, a restaurant or some sort of an entertainment venue, or maybe you run concerts or events or things like that or whatever, and you want when people are in a certain town or even smaller than that, like a zip code or even a neighborhood, you want those people, when they're physically in those places, to see your ads on their phone, only on their phone, not on their computer. Um, this is a really interesting technology in order to be able to do that. So I think especially for, like I was saying, restaurants and places like that, to advertise, to basically have zero waste because you're only advertising to people within that area. And especially if you could do something where, click on the ad to call and make a reservation, or things like that, make it really easy for people on their phone to sort of, interact with you. I think this could be something that could be really interesting and worth trying for a lot of folks, especially a lot of those location-based small businesses. And so with that, I hope a lot of questions have been pouring in. Like I was saying earlier, it's a very exciting time to be a small business because you have so many options available to you. I get how it could also be overwhelming, but never before in the history of small business have you had on the advertising side, a lot of the targeting capabilities available and the ability to reach so many people. You've never had the ability to sort of become your own publisher and become your own radio station by podcasting, or your own TV station by posting videos on YouTube, or your own newspaper by posting blog articles on your own blog. So there's a lot of different capabilities available to small businesses now that frankly really level the playing field a lot more between the big guys and the small guys. And that to me makes it a very, very exciting time to be a small business. And so with that, Brent, hopefully we have a few questions and we can dive in and bat some of those around.
Absolutely. First of all, that was awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. Um, could you talk a little bit about where video is, the importance of video today in marketing, and particularly when it comes to folks, the small business marketing folks?
Yeah, video is great, and I think the neat thing about video is it's so accessible. I mean, so many people, almost everybody today has a phone that records very high quality video now. What I will say is that writing a great blog article is hard. Creating a great video is 10 times harder at least. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish with video. If you're the type of place where you feel like that personal touch of really seeing somebody on video can be really important for your business, then you can try doing it yourself. In my experience, trying to find even a student who has a bunch of video skills, or maybe is in a media program at a local school or something like that, to do some of the stuff, to especially the audio quality on video, I think is something where the phones actually don't do a good job, and good audio is actually one of the things that makes for great video. Um, for a lot of smaller businesses, I sort of recommend that you not leave the video to the professionals, but make sure you don't just record something on your phone and sort of throw it up on your website. Now that being said, if you're talking about more social media, maybe short video clips on Instagram, or even maybe you're getting more aggressive and trying to do some stuff on Snapchat or things like that. That stuff I think can be awesome. But in terms of your website and things like that, I would recommend people at least get a little bit of help. And usually there's usually a small agency or a student, like for a couple $100, you can usually get a little bit of help, and it'll make your video like a lot better. And if it's a business where video can help with that, I think it could be an important thing. It's definitely, like, the consumption of video is going way, way up.
talk a little bit about LinkedIn and how they fit in terms of a marketing device or even an advertising platform compared to the big two.
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a great question. So LinkedIn, if I were if I were a a consumer, small business sells to other consumers, I would probably just ignore LinkedIn, except for hiring and recruiting. If I sell to other businesses, LinkedIn can be a good place. There's a number of different options there. There's a ton of options there in terms of promoting your content for free. So getting into different LinkedIn groups that are related to the industry that you're in, that can be great. They actually have sort of a basically like a blogging platform built in. So anybody in the world now can like write a blog article on LinkedIn basically, which is an interesting place to sort of do some of that types of content, which can be and then you can also like share stuff in a similar way to Facebook, and it sort of gets promoted out to your network on LinkedIn. So that stuff can be effective. Um, they do also have advertising, and they do also have the ability for smaller businesses to just put in a credit card and start to get some ads up. The unfortunate thing about LinkedIn is, in general, in my experience, the ads tend to be on the more expensive side. They have less like real estate on the site devoted to advertising, so it's a little bit more of a limited supply. A lot of the bigger B2B companies tend to bid pretty high for a lot of those ads. And I think, in my experience, it can be a little less effective for the smaller business to really do something there. But if you feel like you're a heavy B2B company and you want to do some experimentation there, I think it can be valuable on both sides. They definitely have a lot of targeting capabilities, and especially what's interesting is they have the ability to target people at a particular company. So let's say you only sell to certain companies in a certain industry or of a certain size, and maybe there's a list of 50 or 100 companies that you sell to. LinkedIn can be a good place if that's going to be your strategy.
Talk about and folks, please keep sending in your questions. We want to make sure we get to those as well. But talk about where people, how do they optimize or find the right balance between lead generation for marketing and conversion? You know, a lot. It seems like there's a great emphasis on generating new leads, and not so much on converting those leads. Maybe some of those leads aren't necessarily ready to go immediately, but if they get a little attention, they may be. But it seems like there's either if it's new and it doesn't sign up right away, then we kind of forget about them and we're trying to bring out new leads. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think, usually what happens for most small businesses is they're not getting enough leads in the door, and then they do a bunch of the things we just talked about, and then their next problem is, they're not all converting, and then they don't really know what to do, and it's like, oh, now I have all these leads I have to manage, right? And so that's a good question. It's almost like it's like the step one is what we just talked about. Step two is what you just asked. So I think a few things there. One is obviously some of those people will be ready to go, and get them signed up, convert them over to customers, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but for the ones that are not, you got to figure out what your strategy is. If you have the ability to do some sort of simple kind of lead nurturing, either through an email drip campaign from one of the, all the lots of tools that do things like that, or even just, manually sending out something maybe to, all of your leads once a month or something like that. Things like that can be a really good way to sort of interact with people. But don't forget too that the other way to kind of more scalably interact with your leads is to maybe get them to sign up to your blog, maybe get them to follow you on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever it is. And then so as you're doing all those things within social media, seeing that content too, and so you're staying top of mind for them until they're ready, right? But the fundamental answer to the question is basically, for people that aren't ready to go right now, is to do some email nurturing. But I would also incorporate a little bit of social media nurturing as well. But yeah.
There's a lot of focus on things like Snapchat and some of the newer social sites. They're getting a lot of interest. When is it important for a small business to actually really start looking at how do they integrate a hot social network into their communication to customers and prospects?
Yeah, it's such a hard thing because the real challenge of small businesses, you don't have a giant team that can do, Snapchat, Instagram, Yik Yak, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all these different things, right? You very quickly are all of a sudden spending all your time on social media and zero of your time running your business. So I think the way to think about it is if it's something that you're interested in and you're spending a lot of time on, then it could be a place where maybe it makes sense for you to dive in with your business because there's obviously something you like about it and are into it. So if you're doing a lot of stuff on Snapchat and following a bunch of other brands and other, people that are posting, the more public stories and stuff like that on there, and you want to sort of get into that and you think it's appropriate for your business, then if it's something that you're interested in, I would say go for it, give it a shot and see how it works. But in general, I would say the key rule is to think about where your customers are and then focus on those places. So if you sell to younger or more tech savvy people, then actually Snapchat might be a place that you want to dive into. If you sell to not so young and not so tech savvy people, then Snapchat is probably going to be a giant waste of time for you, and probably Facebook is maybe a better place to be. So the way I would think about it is just that it's all about finding sort of where are your customers hanging out, combined with the places that you feel like if you spend time there, you would do it beneficially, and to some degree if you enjoy it.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about how difficult is it to rank today compared to a couple of years ago, and where is it going tomorrow? I mean, are folks who are kind of new at doing keyword research and really applying that kind of science to their content, how difficult is it for them to see some results in the short term, and what kind of maybe set some expectations for people as they begin to take some of the things that you've done and shown here and start to use it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely gotten harder to rank and get as much traffic from Google because, every day there's thousands of websites that get launched. There's more competition for it. But the interesting thing is what Google is also doing is sort of kind of increasingly like narrow casting search results. So more and more based on the information they know about you from your usage of Gmail and interacting with their site and their ads and all those things, they're they're tailoring search results to individuals to some degree more and more, and certainly by geography of where you're searching from and where you're located, they're tailoring search results more and more. So no longer is it necessarily the case that Mike Volpe in Boston and Brent Leary in Atlanta get the same search results when we search on the same term. And so what that sort of means is rather than it kind of being a winner take all, it's sort of like the search traffic is being a little bit more evenly distributed, right? And so what that means is while it is certainly harder and the competition's gone up, your ability to have some level of success has also sort of increased at the same time. So it kind of balances out. What I would say is that if you have a brand new website with no links coming into it that's you just launched, it's going to take at least sort of 3 to 6 months, I would say, before you start to see any results. And then you'll be able to build from there. And it's sort of this is one of those things where like you're never done. If you have a site that's been around for a while and you're just not doing a lot of the basics right, but because you've been around and maybe some local publications have talked about you or some directories have linked to you or things like that, and you've been around for a little while, usually with a couple of tweaks, you can get some results within weeks, and you'll see it. And if you use a keyword ranking tracking tool or just looking at your traffic, you'll see a little bit of an effect there, and that can be addictive because it's going to make you want to do more. But again, in general, you're going to see more. It's more of like a 3 to 6 month process typically, and then you can always continue doing more from there. But if you've been around for a little while and have some links coming in, and there's just some obvious things that you're not doing right, then you actually can get some results even in days or weeks that you'll start to notice. It won't be gigantic, but you'll start to notice.
And are any of these tools and techniques that we just talked about, is that different when it comes to the mobile device and the mobile website versus the traditional website and looking at it on a desktop?
No, very similar. The only thing that I would say is more important on mobile is the location stuff starts to become more important, right? And so making sure you're in those location directories, like if you think a higher portion of your customers are going to be searching on mobile, the location stuff is way more important because Google knows that when you're on a mobile device, that location is typically more important for those searches. Not always, but it typically is. And so the location-based stuff is more important.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the mobile sites and the mobile apps are different, and traditionally it seems like mobile sites are used mostly for folks who are maybe prospects and who are looking for information, as opposed to mobile apps who are maybe customers who are looking for functionality. Is that kind of safe to say, or?
Yes, I think you're showing what a smart guy you are, Brent. I think that's a really good way to think about it. And so if you have a high, maybe a low value but high frequency of customer interaction, like a restaurant, then a mobile app might be a good idea because you want to sort of have a good way of those customers, putting the mobile app on their device. There's a local like pizza shop and like Italian food place that's in my town, and I have their app on my phone, and it makes it really easy for me to order from them, right? Um, but I don't know who else. My accountant. It's tax season, right? My accountant doesn't have a mobile app and doesn't need one, right? He's got a mobile website, and if I get a question, I just call him or email him, and I don't even know what his mobile app would do. I guess I could store some documents or things like that, but like not nearly as important because my frequency of interaction with him is almost, it's a couple times a year. It's mostly annual basis, right? So that's probably the way I think about it. But so especially if you maybe have customers where you want a high interaction with them and a lot of repeat ordering and things like that, then maybe some sort of mobile app could be an interesting thing to think about.
One quick question. Oh, okay. So Mary Harris is asking, do you do personal consulting? And if so, what's your rate? Maybe I don't know if you want to answer that right now or if you want to take it offline, but I just thought I'd throw that question out there.
Yeah, I don't know. You can connect us. Maybe I'll answer a question or two by email. I
Okay,
don't. Yeah,
that works.
yeah, no, totally. Yeah, yeah.
One last question, and this is around the the review sites, things like Yelp, and even on the B2B side, you have G2 Crowd, you have GetApp, all these review
Trust
sites.
radius. Yeah.
How do, yeah, how does this play a role in the marketing and promotion, and what should you do in order to try to build your cred up on those kind of sites?
Yeah. You should. I mean, it's one of those things where yes, you should do it. It's but there slowly becomes an endless list for for like all these things that small businesses need to do, and then all of a sudden they literally have zero time to do it. Um, I think what I would do in those things is pick the couple that are really important for you and your industry, right? And so if you're a B2B company, pick, if you're an app company or something like that, probably, G2 Crowd and Trust Radius and things like that are important. Yelp is probably the one that I would say is, in general, maybe the most important for restaurants, but even like local contractors, landscapers, people like that. Um, that's probably the one that I would maybe focus on, but you'll probably have a sense, like start to ask your customers, what are the different sites that they use and things like that. And yeah, and the more of those things you can cover, the better. It's that time investment. And again, it's the last thing I want to do is tell businesses that they should be spending 100% of their time on marketing because they got a whole business to run, like literally, right? So I think you got to be a little careful about the time suck, but yeah, Yelp for most businesses is definitely a place that gets enough traffic and notoriety that might be worth it for the hotel and accommodations industries, and to some degree even increasingly restaurants. Places like TripAdvisor are important. Um, yeah, that stuff is important, and I would definitely work on it. But it's hard. I'm a little cautious of people spending too much time on all this stuff and not enough time and just taking great care of their customers.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time tonight. This has been a great. The hour really flew by. Yeah, a lot of great information. But thanks once again to you. And as you said, I have the slide deck, and we will be making that available to the folks who attended. And we also have been recording this session. So if you missed something, don't worry about it. We'll have it recorded and we'll post it up in the next day or so. But once again, thanks to Mike and thanks to you guys as well for attending. And we will be in touch to tell you about the next in the series, the technology tips and tricks webinar series for the Atlanta Tribune. Thanks and have a great night.